Welcome, everyone, to the captive audience. It's the 11th of June. We're supposed to have Stephen Lloyd here from the Young Republicans with us. I think he's delayed, and hopefully I'll hear from him shortly. But I thought I'd go ahead and get launched here so that we can start talking to you guys about what's gone on today. Today was a pretty eventful day in a number of different ways, but not the least of which is what happened in the national news. We saw that Hunter Biden, the son of Joe Biden, was found guilty in what was really a slam dunk case on 3 counts in a federal gun trial. He's disappointed that he was found guilty in a slam dunk case. And even in a location where you would usually have, an automatic um, advantage, which is Wilmington, Delaware, where the Bidens have lorded over for a long time. But I can tell you that there's a lot of layers to this. He obviously was a drug addict. He signed a form and said he wasn't to buy a gun, and it was a federal crime. So he lied on a form, illegally possessed a weapon. What's really ironic is that his father actually couldn't make it to be there for the trial verdict, even though it was virtually a foregone conclusion. But as we know, Joe Biden actually thinks his son is one of the smartest men he knows. He said that repeatedly, and that Hunter Biden has done nothing wrong. There's been no apologies, but what's ironic about it is the reason why Joe Biden couldn't make it is because he had a pre-scheduled, supposedly, event to go and talk about gun violence and the need for more gun control. You can't make this stuff up. I mean, it's literally like I think somebody recently said that a lot of people wish that Washington, D.C. was like the West Wing, but they believe it's like, what's the name of the Netflix series? I'm forgetting it right now. I watch it several times recently, which is the one with Frank Underwood. I'm sure you guys will chime in here. They think it's like that, but in reality, it's like the TV show Vice with Julie Louis-Dreyfus. Well, this would fit that, where you take a guy who can barely pronounce any words to go make a speech, and what does he do? He goes and speaks about the need for gun control when his son was violating gun laws. And the statement has been repeatedly made: why have gun laws if you aren't going to enforce them? And this is true. And there was this statement, well, no one's above the law. And they specifically asked Joe Biden if he's going to pardon Hunter Biden or not. And he's like, no, I'm not planning to pardon Hunter Biden. Now, Hunter Biden will appeal. There's no doubt about it. I believe he'll be sentenced in just a couple of weeks, very soon, right before the presidential debate. And it usually involves at least a couple of years of jail time on a first conviction. However, it's really amazing because Joe Biden lies all the time, and he's lying now. He didn't say pardon, but he's thinking commutation. So he's going to let the conviction stand because who cares? I mean, Hunter Biden doesn't care if he's a felon. He didn't care if he was a drug addict. He didn't care if he was speeding. He didn't care if he was chasing prostitutes all the time. He didn't care if he was getting his brother, having an affair with his dead brother's a widow and getting her hooked on crack. Didn't care about any of that. So why would he care about like a felony? This guy's all about felonies. And so he's fine with that. It's the jail time. And his dad's not going to let him serve any jail time. The appeal will run past the election. Now, there's more to this story because the media, the lapdog media, is acting like that this is a funeral. It's a terrible thing. All this bad stuff just happened, and it's very unfortunate. It's a tough time for the Bidens, right? But this is the only thing. This is, I think, Congressman Comer, who heads up one of the investigations into the Bidens. I think it's the Oversight Committee in Congress. He said, if I had to list 10 things that Hunter Biden, laws that he's broken, that he should be prosecuted for, the ones he was convicted for today wouldn't even make the cut. They wouldn't make it into the top 10. One thing that this trial did do is it confirmed that despite the lies of our current Secretary of State and, of course, the President of the United States in 2020, and 51 national security professionals, that the laptop from hell, the Hunter Biden laptop from hell, was just a Russian influence operation, a fake, basically. Well, it was used as evidence in a federal trial that got a conviction. And we now know, of course, that the FBI knew back in 2019 that the laptop was real. They knew it. So here's where we're at. They tried to make sure that this trial never happened. They were going to, a year ago, deep six the whole thing by working out a plea deal where Hunter Biden pleads to a misdemeanor or two relating to the gun charges, and then gets a what do you call it? Immunity for all the other stuff he's done, everything, forever, such as the tax charges, the tax evasion charges, which are supposed to be heard, I believe, in August, end of August or something like that, or beginning of September. That's when that goes to trial. Everybody that I've listened to or read information from says that it's just not going to happen. The Hunter Biden laptop is going to live on. It's real. That's what we have to talk about in terms of politics. But this trial that's scheduled for September, they'll file for a continuance. They'll get it. It'll be delayed past the election. And that's the trial that really matters. Why? Because unlike these gun charges, Hunter Biden was the arranger and the gatekeeper and the guy behind all of the dirty money that flowed in from other countries and eventually ended up in Joe Biden's bank account, which we know that from the House Oversight Committee and the bank accounts, that they are constantly actually getting new information about and finding more and more. I think it's up to $26 million now. And would it be election interference to delay? It's a perfunctory thing. It's not hard to get a continuance, especially from a friendly judge and a DOJ that would love for that to happen. It shouldn't happen. It should go to trial. But the reason why this tax evasion trial is important is because those charges actually lead to Joe Biden. The subpoena power that comes with being able to explore those charges, get evidence, figure out where the money came from, where the money went, who had it, how much of it there was, and why weren't there any taxes paid on it. And explain to me how Hunter Biden doesn't pay taxes on something and Joe Biden does for money he says he never got, or he says was paying off a loan from the person who didn't pay taxes. It's almost too contorted for them to pull off. So that trial is going to get punted, right? All the other Trump trials are going to be delayed until after the election. They are going to decide about immunity. The only thing that's going to have gone through the process is what already has, which is the verdict on the I believe Jesse Waters called it the black magic charges with the biased judge who disallowed evidence and allowed stuff that wasn't evidence, and a prosecutor who ran on the promise to get Trump, not not investigate crimes, but get a person, assisted by the third ranking guy at the DOJ, who decided that he just needed a career change and suddenly went over and started helping prosecute this case, the Alvin Bragg case. And a case that rested primarily on the testimony of a stripper who is proven to have lied, and also a former lawyer for Trump who perjured himself and got convicted and put in jail for that. So, yeah, really. Now that one's going to go to appeal, but it's not going to be heard before the election. So the stage is set. However, the laptop is real. That's the most important thing that came out of this entire deal. And I think that's what we have to focus on. I heard several people mention that today, because once it became a fact that was considered and presented in court as evidence, accepted and used in a conviction, is real. Also, the possibility of making prison time, federal gun prison time conviction go away in a tax evasion trial, that is a possibility. The Fed's leverage has gone up. What isn't clear is, will the Feds use it in any way, shape, or form? And I think the answer is probably no. What happened to attorney-client privilege? Well, they decided that didn't matter once, what's his name, the former Trump lawyer who lied and turned on Trump and then lied some more and then lied during the trial. When that guy was considered to have been involved with criminal activity, then they pierced the attorney-client privilege. It's so easy to do, apparently, when a Republican is the target. So anyway, I think we now know that the stage has been set. And like I said, Joe Biden, he had to miss the trial so he could go talk to people about the need for more gun laws, which his son broke. The smartest man he knows. So now there are things going on in the House of Representatives, investigations that are ongoing, and one is going to lead this week, apparently, to a contempt a vote on holding the Attorney General in contempt of Congress for failing to turn over the audio tape that the prosecutor, H-U-R, I don't know what his first name is. I know it's not Ben. That prosecutor recorded when they interviewed President Biden and decided that he wasn't likely to be charged by a jury. Therefore, the crimes that he committed with obtaining and retaining secret and top secret documents, classified documents, that he had no power at any time to possess prior to when he was president. And it was all done while he was in the U.S. Senate and as vice president. That, in fact, they presented all the evidence and said, he did all this stuff. It is a crime. We're not going to prosecute him because he is not competent to stand trial in the eyes of the people that in the juries that we're likely to get. And he just said, we're not going to charge him. So the House of Representatives, the Republicans, have said that they want that audio recording because it speaks to not only whether or not that assessment made is legitimate, the one that was made by the prosecutor, but also whether or not the written transcript is accurate. Because there have been several reports that it's been doctored. Some may believe for legitimate reasons, like ums and ahs being removed, which I don't know why you would remove those things. When you want a full and complete transcript, the president should have the whole thing. But the whole thing should be included about the president. There's no national security interest of ums and ahs. But I got the message basically that from everything that now that President Biden has claimed executive privilege over the audio recording, and there's just no justification for it unless the written transcript omitted something of national security importance, then that audio recording should be released. And what's happened is it's been subpoenaed, and the Attorney General, Merrick Garland, who's really, we should thank our lucky stars every day. Thank the Lord every day that guy got nowhere near being on the U.S. Supreme Court. He's probably the worst Attorney General in history. Certainly rivaling the one that was under Nixon. And you could argue that Merrick Garland is getting away with it, right? So there was one interesting thing at the end of this trial today. Special Counsel Weiss, who was literally forced by the judge to bring the charges forward when they tried this bogus effort to make the whole thing go away and give immunity to Hunter Biden forever. When she blew that up, the judge then forced them to bring actual charges. Well, Weiss thanked Merrick Garland for providing the, quote, necessary support and allowing the special counsel's office to pursue the investigation with, quote, independence, unquote. Right. There's all this evidence that that's not what happened up until the moment that they were forced to do it by the judge. So this is what justice looks like in America right now. And it stinks because they've done damage to the justice system. And now they're claiming that justice was done. But we know that Joe Biden's going to make it all go away. That's what's going to happen. By the way, next, I believe very soon, Alvin Bragg and this Coangelo guy from the Department of Justice who went over to assist Bragg, they're going to testify to the House Judiciary Committee on July 12th, so a month from tomorrow. And they're going to have to explain what they were doing with all of this, communicating with Bragg's office while he was working at the DOJ, which is strongly suspected, as well as other coordination, which Merrick Garland has under oath testified to Congress did not happen. But, right now it seems like the Democrats are literally willing to explain anything away that happens, just anything. And that's what they're doing to the justice system of the country. That alone is a reason to oust all these people from office. That alone, because they will, if they're willing to do it for this, they're willing to do it if they can get away with it on everything. And there's a long list of things that they can get away with and do that will bring our justice system to its knees. In other national news, it looks like the Trump team is seeking a dismissal of the classified documents case over alleged evidence tampering. So that there is evidence, which I believe has been admitted to, at least to some degree, either by Jack Smith, the prosecutor who's overseeing the case, and or I believe maybe Merrick Garland acknowledged that there was some discrepancies between what was stated by the prosecutorial team and what was actually done with the classified documents they claim to have seized and then displayed actually for the camera and released at the time of the raid on Mar-a-Lago. So that one might be going down in flames altogether. They might remove Jack Smith from the case too. That's another possibility. But yeah, Jack Smith was forced to admit in a public filing that he used his team to tamper with evidence, mishandling the very documents that were used as the pretext for the case. And the government acknowledges that this is inconsistent with the government counsel previously understood and represented to the court. So they didn't go and say, we lied. We said someone lied. And I'll bet they're really going to work hard to get to the bottom of that one, aren't they? So, yeah. but that case might be heading for dismissal. I don't think that the Democrats care too much about that one, because if that one goes away and they made the Biden one go away, they just say that the Trump charges were filed, and they'll just keep talking about how he was charged and leave off the part about evidence tampering and dismissal. So, yeah, they're really crushing our justice system right now and weaponizing it for political purposes. By the way, we know from yesterday that Nancy Pelosi admitted, and I don't know if you've had a chance to watch this yet, but Nancy Pelosi has admitted that the January 6th occurrence, that she admitted that she was at fault for failing to order the National Guard to be present, and even questioning once it was happening why they didn't do that. Representative Warren Davidson has come forward. He's a congressman from Ohio, and said that the January 6th committee now is pretty obvious that it wasn't to investigate and get to the truth. It was designed to cover up the Capitol security failures and obscure who was actually responsible for it. So, pretty interesting statement. There's still no answer as to who planted the pipe bombs next to the DNC or the RNC. But that question wasn't even really being asked or explored by the January 6th committee. Now, there is one very interesting thing I should mention, that the congressman from Kentucky, or senator from Kentucky, has argued, and along with a congressman, so it's Rand Paul and Congressman Thomas Massie from Kentucky, I believe, as well, are calling on Speaker Johnson to rescind the congressional subpoena of Steve Bannon and officially repudiate the January 6th committee by a vote of Congress. That would keep Steve Bannon, among others, from going to jail. I believe there's also someone else that would potentially face that as well, but I think Steve Bannon is the main one. All they would have to do is vote in Congress to rescind the congressional subpoena, to rescind Congress's own subpoena, and then repudiate the January 6th committee, and boom, there's no basis, there's no grounds any longer for Steve Bannon to go to prison for rejecting it. And so I think this is an interesting situation. It is a question that's being asked. I'm going to post here something called, it's citizencaller.com. You can check it out. It actually provides a way for you to contact Speaker Johnson, and it has kind of a contact form, as well as sort of a pre-made format of an email asking Speaker Johnson to do exactly what we just described, and other information. So I just posted that. It's called Citizen Caller. You might want to spread that around if you think there's folks that would be very interested in doing that. But it is an opportunity to right a great wrong. And it's because this subpoena of Bannon to testify was promulgated by a committee whose aims and purpose were phony. It was a scam. It was a cover-up scheme. And we also know that some of the members of that committee, I believe some of whom are no longer in Congress, have been involved with destroying evidence, that there's actually evidence that's been reported that they destroyed in order to make sure it couldn't fall into the hands of the Republican majority in Congress once Republicans took over. You don't get to do that. That's illegal. You don't have the power to just go tear up papers and make them go away as a member of Congress. It's a congressional public record, and it is not in the hands of any one member of Congress to go and terminate that information. In fact, I'm pretty sure there's a dozen records acts that pertain to not being able to destroy any of that. And as you know, Democrats play fast and loose with that. If you can recall President Trump's final State of the Union speech, Nancy Pelosi took the copy of the speech and tore it. And they said, actually, she violated a Congressional Records Act by doing that. That speech is technically property of Congress and a record, not Nancy Pelosi's personal files. So, well, that's, I think, a good summary of what's happening at the national level. Let's shift gears here and talk a little bit about what's happening here in Oregon, because there's quite a bit happening. So we saw that there was this rescue of hostages in Israel. They rescued 4 Israeli hostages, and the Taxpayer Association put out an editorial here that said, this is actually interesting because Senator Merkley, the Oregon senator who called for a ceasefire within 3 weeks of the Hamas attack on Israel, just 3 weeks afterwards, which killed 1,200 people, he wanted negotiations. And of course, Israel has made offers, offering to set free 600 Hamas prisoners, including 100 murders, in exchange for 40 innocent, captured, and often tortured, raped Israeli citizens from the October 7th attack. Hamas has refused. They said they wanted 1,000 prisoners released. Senator Merkley asked that military aid for Israel be cut off. The aid that's being used by Israel to help set free the hostages, actually, in part. In total, Jeff Merkley asked Israel to stop attempting to free hostages, which includes 5 American hostages that Jeff Merkley couldn't give a flying crap about. Since the very beginning, and to stop Israel from, to stop helping Israel help free hostages by blocking the military aid used to rescue the hostages. A few days ago, it was announced, of course, that 4 more hostages were confirmed dead. Hamas not only rejected deals to free these hostages, they're just outright killing them. A third of the hostages have been killed. That is what Jeff Merkley didn't want Israel to do anything about. So I think he's officially pro-Hamas at this point. I mean, there's just no other way to look at it because it's inane. And this rescue that took place makes Jeff Merkley look like a complete fool. If your definition of fool is I want to save lives, and you propose something that actually causes death, and death to people who were not innocents, but the hostages, of course, innocents, but he's concerned about the deaths, the collateral damage that occurred. Well, you know what they found out? That the hostages that were rescued from the inside of a journalist's apartment that was working for Hamas. That they were hiding, and they are hiding, many of these hostages in the homes of civilians. That the 250 odd people that Hamas has claimed were killed in the effort to rescue these hostages by Israeli special forces and Israeli intelligence, those people were killed almost entirely by the Hamas people that were holding the hostages coming out and firing indiscriminately in their own neighborhood at the Israelis, only one of whom was killed. And that was one of the leaders of the effort, one of the commanders of the effort, and a legendary Israeli special forces guy who he's the only one that was killed. All these other people that were killed, the overwhelming number of them were actually killed by Hamas as they fired rifles, machine guns, rocket propelled grenades, etc., trying to hit the Israelis. You know what? If you're a civilian, don't take hostages, because then you're a combatant. If you're a civilian, don't hang around where hostages are being taken. if you're a civilian, don't come out and start firing at Israelis indiscriminately in your own neighborhood and killing your neighbors. Don't do that stuff. And then people won't die. And there is no negotiating with Hamas ultimately. They are not a partner in a peace deal. They are not a governing entity. They're a bloodthirsty terrorist organization sworn to the destruction and murder of all Israelis. So this is who Jeff Merkley thinks we should be negotiating with. So, and then of course, we know that the Biden administration is trying to funnel aid into these guys, and the aid is going straight to Hamas. It's like a no-brainer. You know, how dumb do you have to be, really? It's just, it is inane. By the way, I got a message. I think Stephen was out of cell service range, and so he wasn't able to make it. He got delayed at work. But you know what? I really think that we're having a good show here today. I hope you guys are finding it interesting. Time flies. I can't believe it's already 35 minutes have passed here, and I've got more to tell you about. So this is a big story, and it's going to make national news. And I think you're going to find that Republicans are going to be rallying around this and bringing this to voters because they're going to look at this in a different way than they've ever looked before. As you know, because Democrats have controlled this state, and they've certainly controlled the legislature and the governorship. They've been able to pass laws called sanctuary laws, which they claim is simply to make sure that immigrations and customs enforcement can't come and just start arresting dishwashers at work who are present in the country illegally and deporting them. However, these sanctuary laws clearly have served another purpose, one of which is to make sure that when illegal immigrants come to Oregon and they commit crimes, including felonies, they will not face deportation. They will be treated as if they are actually just citizens. And as we know, there was a bill at the federal level, two bills actually, that are very important that would have required that immigrations and customs enforcement arrest, detain, and deport any illegal immigrant who attacks a police officer, attacks law enforcement, which we saw actually in New York City. We saw National Guard being overrun and attacked in Texas, in El Paso, Texas. And there was the Laken Riley Act, which is that if a legal immigrant gets involved in a certain category of criminal infractions, that they should be deported, not left to hang around until one day one of them decides to go and bash the head in of a college co-ed who went out for a walk or jog in her she thought relatively safe neighborhood, in this case in Athens, Georgia. But what Oregon has done is they've already passed state laws that says that local law enforcement and state law enforcement are forbidden from cooperating with ICE in the furtherance of turning over even the most hardened criminals to the feds for processing and deportation. Now, of course, right now, the other problem is if they're deported, they'll just come back across our completely open border. But here's what's been proposed in the last few days. Two Republican state lawmakers, Tim Knopp, who is the outgoing senator from Bend, who was also until recently, the state Senate Republican minority leader, and Vicky Breeze Iverson, who was until recently also the House minority leader prior to Representative Jeff Helfrich taking over, who, by the way, we will have Jeff on Friday's Captive Audience show. I'll be interviewing him, and we'll be broadcasting that on Friday. And I think you'll find that very interesting. And I will ask him about this issue because I'm sure he has something to say about it. But they proposed a bill. Well, it's actually just in memo form right now to roll back Oregon sanctuary laws. These are passed by the Democrats repeatedly to pander to what they saw as a growing group of future, or many people call them undocumented Democrats. And some of that isn't quite working the way they hoped, because a lot of Hispanic voters are shifting over to Republicans, especially the working class ones. And many of them say they're going to vote for President Trump. And a huge shift, even just from 2020, which saw an increase in Hispanic support for President Trump over previous Republican nominees. I think the low watermark was Mitt Romney in 2012 in terms of support from the Hispanic community. Well, that's shifted entirely. However, they did this, and they said that they weren't going to allow the state of Oregon to be a place that would cooperate with ICE and deport even the worst criminals that happen to be present in the state illegally, in the country illegally. Well, so Senator Knopp, Representative Breeze Iverson believe that Oregon has been significantly impacted by the open border, the surge of illegal entries, the influx of fentanyl and other illicit drugs from that southern border. And if we're going to get it under control, they believe that the people in the state of Oregon probably see this issue differently now and may well be supportive of rolling this back. So, and they want to make it easier for local law enforcement to do the job that actually people now expect them to do, now that this is the number one issue in nearly all polls. I think they might be onto something here. It's a long shot bill in terms of passing it in the state legislature. And there was a bill passed in 2021 by Democrats that actually strengthened Oregon's decades-old sanctuary protections, creating explicit prohibitions on local officials aiding federal immigration authorities. But this memo, they're saying they're committed to bringing a repeal of the Sanctuary Promise Act in the 2025 legislative session. And neither one of Senator Knopp will not be in the 2025 state legislative session because of the walkout and the court ruling saying he couldn't run again, even though, of course, that's unfortunately not what Measure 113 actually said verbatim, but they somehow figured out what voters actually meant, or what voters actually thought. So apparently we have extraordinary mind readers in the state Supreme Court here in Oregon. But what it's led to is they believe a full reconsideration of the sanctuary laws here in Oregon. And I think they might be onto something. And of course, there's also going to be the issue that the millions and millions and millions, I've heard the number now is somewhere around 10 or 11 million, if you include gotaways, not in addition to the ones that they've actually processed into the country, many of whom are claiming asylum that rarely actually is validated by our immigration court system. But once they get into the country, they just go to a sanctuary jurisdiction and then say, well, I'm not even going to go to my court hearing, and you can't make me because I'm in a sanctuary state. Well, this is what is in front of us now, is that this might get pushed to the legislature and then potentially in front of voters here in 2026. And they learned something from their trip to Arizona that the legislators took. They repeatedly heard while they were there, every state is a border state. And they believe it has increasingly become relevant as the Biden administration thinks that they're taking some phony executive action this week. And there's far more to do. But with a change in administration, which looks, according to the polls, somewhat likely, there may be a reason for all these people that Biden let in under these false pretenses to send them home. And now there are some people who would disagree with that. Val Hoyle is one of them. And Congresswoman Val Hoyle believes we need this movement through the border. She's on the record saying that she's voted against every effort to strengthen border security, to secure the border, should make it easier to remove violent, criminal, illegal immigrants from the country. She's voted against all of it. The only thing she has done is signed a letter out of desperation asking President Biden to do what he did, which is his phony border executive order, which, according to eyewitness reports, since that order took place, has had no effect. They're not enforcing it. It was all smoke and mirrors and theatrics for the election. And it's not going to change anything because nobody's going to start believing that Joe Biden actually wants to get control of the border. It's too late. That debate's going to happen at the end of June, and it's going to be a main issue. This is going to be a border security election, among others. It's also going to be an election about inflation, which they're all Biden trying to blame Trump for, even though all the inflation happened on Biden's watch and Biden fueled it. But coming back to this issue, they do these polls and they find out that people believe immigration is a positive thing for the country, but they do not believe in overwhelming numbers that an open, unsecured border and that mass illegal immigration is actually good for the country. So this is going to continue to be an issue, and I'm glad to see that some people are taking a step forward. Now, there was a 2018 ballot measure which would have rolled back the state sanctuary status that existed back then prior to the 2021 law. And House Speaker Julie Fahey from Eugene has said that any attempt to roll back sanctuary protections appears likely to meet a similar fate in the legislature, which is to be rejected. Okay, you should go ahead and then do what you said, Speaker Fahey, but do so knowing that actually you're probably creating a great reason for people to vote you and your party out of office in 2026 here in Oregon, and maybe even in 2024, just based on the fact that she's saying it now. Senator Knopp, even though he won't be a member of the Senate then, does plan to file the bill before he leaves office in January. So stay tuned, be ready to rally for this, and maybe be ready to sign a ballot initiative that'll do this and overrule the ruling Democrats here in the state of Oregon. Now, did I post that link so you can see it? Yeah, let me post the link to it. It's an article that explains this in some detail, and I think it's important that you share this with as many people as you can. Here's something that kind of stood out to me. Oregon is the second worst in the nation for retail pharmacy access. And you might say, well, why? Because we constantly hear how the government's working and spending money on making sure everybody has access to healthcare here in the state of Oregon. They've formed all these entities, these blue ribbon commissions, these coordinated care organizations, all this stuff. And yet it seems like in Oregon, we just have 610 retail pharmacies as of February. That's just 14.4 pharmacies per 100,000 people. 100,000 people. It's the second fewest retail pharmacies per capita in the nation, with poorer access to pharmacies than any state except Alaska. And Alaska, you can almost understand, given that it's very limited population and a lot of tundra, right? Well, that's one of the things that you learn. And then, by the way, the 36 pharmacies closed last year, several more this year in 2024. Says Brian Mayo, the executive director of the Oregon Pharmacy Association. But, right, yeah, you can have as much free healthcare as you want. You just won't be able to get any of it. And one of the reasons why this has happened to retail pharmacies, besides the fact that they are struggling and finding personnel to hire, but every state is having this. This is where the CAT tax, the corporate activities tax, has hit these guys hard. I believe there was an entire chain. I don't remember which one it was, but it was a major chain. Just pulled out of Oregon and said, well, it's killing all our profit margins, so we can't do it anymore. So goodbye. I don't remember which one it was. It wasn't Walgreens. and it wasn't Rite Aid, but it was another, and they just pulled out. Well, that was government literally killing off a business they say is essential. That's what your government in Oregon does. Another couple of stories before we wrap up here. Measure 114. So there were errors in the trial transcript in Harney County, and now the state of Oregon, the Attorney General, they have urged that the Oregon Court of Appeals put consideration of the state's appeal of the Harney County judge's ruling on Measure 114 as unconstitutional, to put it on the fast track. But it's taken nearly 2 months before the state could file its opening brief. And the reason why is gun owners who challenged the measure have urged the appellate court to dismiss the appeal because the state missed the initial deadline of May 31st that the court set for submitting it. And then at issue is a transcript of the 8-day trial that led the Harney County judge to strike down the voter-approved measure last November. The measure's two main provisions, a permit to buy a gun and a ban on the sale, transfer, and manufacture of magazines holding more than 10 rounds, he ruled violated Article 1, Section 27 of the state's constitution, which establishes a right to bear arms. The Oregon Assistant Attorney General Robert Koch said that the state had to wait for a final transcript from the Harney County trial to be completed before filing their opening brief to make appropriate citations to brief trial testimony. Michael Cron, who's a special counsel to Ellen Rosenblum, the Attorney General, the outgoing one, very corrupt woman, said that the appellate court made it clear it's impossible to submit an opening brief until the underlying transcript of the trial is approved. The final transcript, Cron said in the briefing dial, is automatically suspended. So Attorney Tony Aiello, representing the gun owners, said this is just noise. Said the appeals court, allowing for extensions in its filing schedule only for extraordinary circumstances, should now dismiss the state appeal because of the missed May deadline. But the state, of course, is going out of its way to make sure that this challenge can be filed. There is concern that the appellate court, which is entirely composed of left-wing Democrats, appointed by left-wing Democrats like Kate Brown and her predecessors, that they will probably overturn it, even though the state's constitution is pretty explicit, and actually more explicit than the U.S. Constitution in this regard. So stay tuned for that. There's people playing games. And while we're all watching these other issues, we have to keep track of what's happening in our name in the court system. Last two issues. Amazon has scrapped a plan to use natural gas fuel cells to run its data centers. They've quietly withdrawn their regulatory application to use natural gas-powered fuel cells to provide electricity for its data centers. Now, I know many of these data centers first came to Oregon because of plentiful, cheap, reliable hydropower. But as we know, Democrats have been taking down dams and removing hydroelectric power facilities. But they were hoping to get these fuel cells in place because of the electrical transmission constraints that exist where they've chosen to locate these data centers, which in this case is Morrow County. But climate watchdogs and environmental activists raised the alarm, saying the fuel cells would contribute to climate change and make Amazon a major customer of the controversial gas transmission Northwest Pipeline, which runs from British Columbia to California. So they've decided to cut their nose off to spite their faces at Amazon. And, data centers are really starting to suck up a major portion of the world's electrical grid. And it is, of course, putting pressure on all forms of generation, but clean power is not keeping up with it. Clean power, as they describe it, which is windmills, which don't work when the wind doesn't blow, and solar panels, which don't work when the sun doesn't shine, and massive battery facilities, which don't exist yet, will somehow keep up. They believe it'll keep up with what is expected to be more than a doubling of electrical demand here in the Northwest by the 2040s. And that's being driven by these data centers. So this is what has happened while everyone else is watching. Environmental activists are killing off needed energy generation capabilities. And unfortunately, woke companies are giving into it. Last story, and then we'll wrap up here, is that according to that, there was a poll that was done, and it is KATU has published it. It says, if the presidential election were held today, who would you vote for? And there's 26 days remaining. And in this poll on KATU, the ABC affiliate in Portland, there are 29,119 votes so far. Of course, this is an Portland, Oregon-based news outlet. 68% have voted for Donald Trump, 23% for Joe Biden, 9% for other. Republicans don't usually win these Portland-based polls, but I'm going to post this for you so you can share it with your friends and send it off to everyone you know who might want to participate in this. I'm pretty sure there will be a move by the people who are trying to force this this animated corpse back onto the American people for another 4 years to get people to vote in this. But it's interesting that they're actually having a hard time doing it spontaneously as it is. Like, you do measure in elections who has the strongest sentiment, the strongest feelings about their candidate. And right now, 68% Donald Trump, 23% Joe Biden, 9% other, 29,119 votes so far. So check it out. That's probably a good note to end on. I want to thank everybody for joining me here for the show tonight. We'll get Stephen back on another time. And again, I've flown solo for 2 days. I hope it's okay. I promise you, we will have a guest on Friday. And I believe you'll definitely hear from Sonny and Don tomorrow night on the next episode of The Captive Audience. Thank you, everyone, for watching. And get out there and let everyone know that there is a voice here in Oregon speaking out and sharing a perspective on the news you can find nowhere.